Tags inside of Azure are simply just a name value pair, right? This is commonly referred to as like a key value pair, but in this case, we'll just refer to it as a name value pair. It ultimately means the same thing. And in Azure, we can use tags to do various things. For example, we could create a name for a tag that says department, and we're going to then assign a value to that depending on what department resources are associated with. For example, if we deploy resources into Azure and we give them a department tag with the value of marketing, then we can discern that all of those resources with this department marketing tag are going to be associated with the marketing department. And we can do this for various departments in our organization. And this helps with doing things like cost analysis, where we're trying to derive how much money is the marketing team spending on resources inside of Azure. And we can do this for various departments in our organization. We could also break this up into things like maybe we want to say what resources are resources that are being utilized inside of the United States and what resources are being utilized in, for example, Europe, so that we can determine our costs geographically. Now, as another tagging convention example, we might want to organize our environments into production, dev, or test workloads so that we can discern what Azure resources are part of production, what's part of dev, what's part of test. And there's various ways to organize these things. We could create a production subscription, a development subscription, a test subscription, so that we kind of have almost these deployment zones for our workloads whenever we're doing things like dev tests and pushing to production. But this is just another one of those ways to show that tags are flexible, and any use case that we can dream up for using tags, well, we certainly can do that. And when we're creating tags, it's important to understand that for tags for the names, they can be 512 characters, and the value can be 256 characters, with the caveat that for storage accounts, the name can only be 128 characters long. Now let's take a look at our diagram here where we have a marketing subscription with some resource groups for database and web application running inside of the subscription. Well, if we wanted to understand whether or not this marketing subscription is part of a production workload, well, we could use that tagging convention for production so that we understand that this marketing subscription has some production resources in it, and maybe it has some development resources in it as well, and we could tag those accordingly. Now that we've taken a look at this, let's look at the resource tag assignment hierarchy to help us understand a few things. Firstly, I want to say that tags are not inherited from the assignment scope. So, for example, this department marketing tag that we have here and the marketing subscription is not going to be inherited by all of the underlying resource groups and resources that they contain. We'd have to actually go to each of these resource groups and assign it the appropriate tagging, and the same would be the case for the resources that they contain. They are not inherited. Now, we could certainly use something known as Azure policies to create a policy that forces this inheritance of these tags for things inside of resource groups, for example, but it is not something that is going to be natively supported by just creating tags. Now, another thing that I want you to keep in mind is that resources can have up to 50 tags at a time. So we don't have an unlimited capacity to assign tags, so we need to think very carefully about what tagging conventions we are going to use inside of our organizations before we actually start using them at scale, so that we can plan appropriately and also have space for more tags in the future should the need arise. Now let's get into our demonstration piece. For our demonstration here, we're going to log into the Azure portal inside of the Azure Cloud Sandbox here on the platform. We're going to go through a process of determining what tag we want to use here. And this is going to be a bit of a creative component here where I'm going to let you decide what sort of tagging convention for name value you would use in your environment. I will use one for the demonstration. However, you certainly don't have to use that one. You can come up with your own if you'd like. And then we're going to tag the resource group that we have inside of our Azure Cloud Sandbox, just so that we can walk through the process of actually assigning a tag inside of the Azure portal. So let's make our way over to the Azure Cloud Sandbox and get started. All right, gurus. So here we are inside of the Azure Cloud Sandbox. So we'll get started by coming up to the search bar here and typing in resource groups. And then we'll select resource groups under services here. We'll see we have the one default provided resource group, which our user is scoped to with its role assignment. We'll select it here, we'll minimize this portion of the blade, and we'll click on tags to the left-hand blade of this resource group. What we'll see here is any of the taggings that we have associated with this resource, which at this time is none. Now that we've logged into the portal, we need to determine what tagging convention we want to use. And this is the part where I'm going to let you choose to go ahead and pause video and create your own tag name value pair if you would like to do so. But for my case, I'm going to go ahead and use one. I'm going to type in MS resource usage and I'll select it here. And then I'm going to give it a value. Let's say, for example, I want to use the value of that this is the production, which will let me know that any resource with this name value pair is part of the production environment. Now, something to keep in mind with these tagging inside of our resources for Azure is that we can't reuse the same name. So if I were to have an env name here and this one be test, I would not be able to then use the same name for another tag pair here because the name must be exclusive and unique each time that you use it. So you can't use it in that way. But you could develop something like this MS resource usage here, and then you could have a different value where you're saying it's part of the development environment. So let me go ahead and delete these here. And then I'm going to click apply, and this is going to apply this tagging convention to our resource group. And we don't have any resources inside of this resource group as of yet, but it does not inherit them. And if you want to test that, you can even do a little bit of extra work here, even though we're done with the demonstration, and deploy some resources to see that it actually doesn't inherit the tags of the resource group. And here in the browser, in another tab, I actually have a ARM template from a Microsoft provided quick start template that we could actually deploy if you want to. I'll provide a link to this in the resources of this video. However, this is not part of the demonstration necessarily, and you certainly don't have to follow along. You can go ahead and continue on past this point. But if you'd like to, it's just something else you can do to kind of play around and get familiar with the environment, as I like to provide certain scenarios and different experiences inside of Azure to help you get your hands on all of these services. So if I go to my other tab here, you see I have this. I'll copy all of this here from the raw GitHub link, come to the search bar, and I'll type in ARM template. I'll click deploy a custom template under services. And here I'm going to build my own template in the editor. I'll select all, I'll paste in what is in the clipboard, click save, and it's going to select some things such as the resource group that we're scoped to and the region for me. It's going to use the region based on the resource group. And then I'm going to create some things here using this template by filling out these parameters. We're going to have to provide a globally unique storage account name. So I'm going to call this the EZ104 STG demo 01, and hopefully that's going to be a unique name. Otherwise, it will tell us it isn't. And then provide an admin username for the virtual machine this is going to deploy. I'll use Azure user. And then I'll provide my password here. And then a DNS name for the load balancer public IP. I'll go ahead and just use EZ104 storage demo 01, same as the storage account. Why not? And then the VM name prefix here, we'll leave all these things set to the default, and we'll click review and create. It's going to validate the deployment of this ARM template here that we've gotten from the quick starts on the Microsoft Azure GitHub. We'll click create here, and it's going to go off and deploy these resources. So I'm going to come back once this deployment is finished. Hey gurus, I'm back, and the deployment from this ARM template has completed. So let's go ahead and go into our resource group here. And inside of our resource group, again, for this resource group object, we see we have our tag that we set here. But if we go into any of these resources that are now contained within this resource group, what we'll see is that they are not inherited. For example, let's go to the my VM 0 here. And if we go to tags, what we're going to see is it has no tags. And that's, again, because tags are not inherited further down in the scope of assignment. So you assign it to resource group, it's not going to be inherited by all the resources that are contained by that resource group, and so on, because that's just how tags work. It's not a default behavior for them to be inherited. You could do things like use Azure policy to enforce that kind of behavior, or you could even do more custom solutions such as creating Azure CLI or PowerShell scripts where you're using specific commands and commandlets to get all of the resources. Say, for example, in this resource group, you could say get AZ resource using an Azure PowerShell commandlet, get all the resources in this resource group, and you could hard code that resource group string name, or you could pass it in as the parameter to your script. We'll get all those resources, and then you could use another command like set -az resource, where you're going to go through and then set a tag for all those resources that you're now looping through inside that resource group. So there's just a couple of ways that you could actually use some automation to apply tagging at scale for a lot of resources and environments where you might have hundreds of resources inside of resource groups or even in subscriptions. All right, gurus. Now that we've completed this demonstration and I've gone a little bit above and beyond in showing you some of the things for tagging inside of Azure, let's go ahead and make our way back to the slides for a quick review. All right, gurus, congratulations on following me all the way through this lengthy lesson about tagging resources inside of Azure. Now, the key takeaways from this lesson that I want you to have are that we understand that these tags, these name value pairs, can be used to do all sorts of things inside of Azure. And the sky's the limit with this because it's really a flexible type of resource. And we can use it for things like managing resources via tags. We can use it for cost analysis on resources based on tag. We could use it for things like performing automated operations by doing things like getting all of the resources, such as virtual machines, running inside of Azure that are part of the development workload using that development tag. And then we could perform things like update operations or shut all of them down. Whatever we need to do with the tags, they're a flexible type of object inside of Azure. Now, as we saw in the demonstration, tags are not inherited from a higher scope like a resource group or a subscription. Each resource must be tagged independently. There's various ways that we can use Azure services such as Azure Policy to enforce tagging inheritance, or we can actually create automation scripts using PowerShell or Azure CLI to be able to do things like this as well. All right, gurus, thanks so much for joining me in this lesson. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Hey, gurus, I'm Chase, one of your Azure training architects here at ACG.